From Beam Media in Dallas, Texas, this is The Jack Attack, and I am your host, Jack Everett, and today I'm going to do something I promised to do when I was doing my Blade Runner series, and that is I am going to talk about one of my favorite games, and it is going to be, of course, Blade Runner. Now, to begin my discussion on the game Blade Runner, I'm going to present this more as a personal narrative. I'm going to talk about my experience with the game. So this won't be a straightforward review per se, though I will give the game a review, more or less my opinion on the game at the end of this. But to begin with, I want to talk about how I came to find out about the game Blade Runner. It all started with a paper route. The year was 1997. Every time I did it, I'd always complain to my mom about how much I hated this paper route. And she just felt so bad for me out there. But my mom was the one that originally got me the job. And she wanted me to learn responsibility. And so I had to save half of the money that I made. And I'm pretty sure I was only getting paid $10 a week. So I would spend $10 and save $10. And I don't know what I spent that $10 on, but I sure blew through it really fast and never had anything to show for it. So I presume I got candy or something. So what must have been 8 weeks later or so, a mere 2 months. You know, I think I only did it 2 to 4 months at most. But at the end of it all, I told my mom, I want to quit. And my mom is like, well, I feel so bad for you working so hard doing that paper route. You can quit. And she felt so sorry for me that she was like, well, I did want to teach you the responsibility of saving, but you worked so hard on that paper route. You can just have all the money in your bank account. And at that time, I had $80. Well, at 14 years old, $80 was the most money I ever had at once in my life. I was used to getting a mere $10 or $20 on my birthday, and that's pretty much all the money I would have in any given year. But here I was a rich man. I had $80, and all I could think to myself is, I am absolutely going to get a video game. But I didn't know what video game I wanted. I had nothing in mind. Our whole family goes to the department store, and it was this store called Fred Meyer. You might know Fred Meyer because they're currently a jewelry store, but at the time they were a department store. So we go to Fred Meyer and to the video game section, and I'm just browsing through all the PC games because I know I want a PC game. And I kind of thought, oh, maybe I'd get Descent. Descent was a game out at the time, and I had seen it at a friend's house, and it looked pretty cool. As I walked into the department store, the video game department, lo and behold, there was this kiosk. I think it's what they call a point of purchase kiosk, but it's just like a display case, and it had this game, and it was like the grandest thing ever. It like had this McCoy character, life size, standing next to all the shelves for the video game, and I wish I had a picture of what it looked like, and I tried to look it up, but I was unable to find the display case for it, so I don't think anyone ever took a picture of any of these display cases. But I was like, I don't know what Blade Runner is, but that gun looks cool, that coat looks cool, that tie looks cool, that guy looks awesome. This is what I was thinking when I saw this game Blade Runner. And so I absolutely had to look at it. So I take a look at the back of the box, and I'm like, Los Angeles, November 2019. 2019? That's like 25 years from now. I'm like, it's the future. And like, there's all these cool pictures on the back of the box. And they're like, this is the first real-time 3D adventure game. And as soon as I saw this, I knew this was the game that I was going to get. All other games I did not care about. Descent, oh, forget Descent. This looks way... Descent doesn't have a guy with an awesome gun like this. And so I take a look at the box because I'm a bit concerned because our PC was not the greatest of computers. And I read the back of the box and I'm a little bit scared because the requirements say Pentium 90 megahertz CPU, 16 megabytes of RAM, and 16-bit SVGA graphics. And I look at that and it says 90 megahertz is required for this game. And I'm a bit worried there because our computer is a 75 megahertz Pentium 1 processor. So it is 15 megahertz too slow to run this game. But I actually wasn't too worried about that because we had gotten another game a couple months before called Star Trek Starfleet Academy. And that game also said it required a 90 megahertz Pentium processor. But it played just fine on our computer. I mean, at least as fine as we expected a game to play. So I figured Blade Runner will be the same. Maybe it'll run a little slow, but the game in general should be perfectly fine. And I'm like, I have to have this game. I have to have this game, Blade Runner. So I buy it. So naturally, on the way home, I'm just reading over the back of the box, and it is saying the awesomest things. Immerse yourself in the dark, gritty world of Los Angeles 2019, where you become both the hunter and the hunted. 4 CDs packed with over 100 interactive environments, including original movie sets. Groundbreaking, real-time story structure creates a unique experience every time you play. Now, I knew nothing about Blade Runner, and I didn't even really know what this type of game was. I didn't know anything about adventure games or anything like that. But I gathered from the back of the box it was based off of some movie from a long time ago that I'd never heard of. But naturally, on the drive home, I open up the box, and I open up this CD and I'm like, oh man, it's the awesome McCoy guy. And of course, part of the reason why I was like, this game must be okay is because I did recognize the name Westwood Studios and I had played Command and Conquer. So I knew that they were a good studio at least. All right, so I open it up and I see 4 CDs. This is the most amazing thing ever. 4 CDs is just absolutely amazing. And there's this manual here. And then there was a second manual right here for me to look at and read on the drive home. And it wasn't really a very long drive home, but I was still excited to open up this manual and read through and look at all the cool pictures that were seen in it because they showed off the really awesome graphics of the game. And this one showed all the different characters in the game. So we get home and now we all gather around the computer. Well, me and my brother and sister. My mom may not have cared that much. But we gather around the computer and we're installing it, and it has taken forever to install it. The installer is showing all these cool scenes from the game, and I'm looking forward to seeing all of them. I'm like, they're going to be absolutely amazing. But finally, the game is installed. And so I boot it up, and there on the screen, it's like Westwood and the Blade Runner partnership present Blade Runner. And then utter disappointment struck me. The opening cutscene ran at such a low frame rate, you could barely tell what was going on, and no audio went through at all. Like, absolutely no audio at all went through this game. So it's like I got to see a slideshow of pretty cool looking images, but I had no idea what the characters were saying, and it was just devastating. I'm like, watching this cutscene, I'm like sort of crying because I'm like, I got all hyped up about this game. Like, I wasn't upset that I had spent $50 on the game and I couldn't even play it. I was upset at how excited I was to play the game. We sort of slogged through watching this opening video, and we're all disappointed. We're all looking at this monitor and we're disappointed. And then the opening cutscene ends, and I don't really know what happened in the opening cutscene. But it goes into the actual game where McCoy's spinner lands in front of Runciter's. And I'm looking at this scene and I'm like, man, this really does look awesome. But I can tell it's running too slow. And so McCoy pops out of his spinner and he does his line about how Animal sales were a profitable and prestigious business.
Animal sales was a profitable and prestigious business since most real animals had died out after the Terran War. There were plenty of electric ones, though, powered by rechargeable batteries. No self-respecting human would own one of those frauds.
You know, that whole thing. But it doesn't sound like that. It doesn't sound like McCoy. It's like McCoy's like, animal sales were profitable and prestigious business since most real animals had died off during the Terran War. So it would do this thing where, like, what I figure it was doing is the game was running so slow and the audio was just running at normal speed. So the audio, when it realized it had gotten ahead of the game, it had to jump back and play through that part of the audio game. But you could at least hear what was going on. In the cutscene, in the opening cutscene, like, no audio even went through at all. It was like, and that was it. That was all the audio that you could distinguish in the opening cutscene. But in the game, you could at least hear the audio. It would just repeat sometimes. And so I do what everyone that would play the game for the first time does, and I click on that piece of chrome that's out in the middle of the street. And McCoy is just walking so slow up to that piece of chrome, and I'm like, I know this character's not supposed to be walking this slow. He's walking just incredibly slow. But he picks up the piece of chrome, and that cop approaches him, and the cop is like, find something, find something, find something. And McCoy's like, piece of chrome. And the cop's like, from a car, from a car, from a car. And then McCoy drops his sarcastic line of, no, I think it's horse chrome. I think it's horse chrome. I think it's horse chrome.
Find something?
Piece of chrome.
From a car?
No, I think it's horse chrome. Bag it and tag it.
Despite this, I'm looking at this scene of Runcitors with the crowd off to the left of the screen, McCoy's spinner to the right of the screen, the neon sign above Runcitors, and it just looks absolutely beautiful. I mean, despite the fact that it's running half a frame per second, it looks absolutely gorgeous. Like, I'm like, this looks so awesome. Now, after that, of course, the only natural thing to do was I just kept playing the game. Like, we played through the whole game. I mean, I played through it by myself, and then my brother played it, and I don't think my sister really played it that much. But my brother played through it as well, and we just didn't care. Like, the game was so awesome in our minds. We didn't care that all the dialogue was skipping and that we just couldn't watch any of the cutscenes. But I remember thinking at the time, I looked forward to the day when I would be able to play the game in its full, perfect frame rate glory without audio skipping and be able to watch the cutscenes. And I remember I ended up, after a while, after having played through the game once or twice, and I think I got 2 different endings of the game, just playing it all slow. I let a friend of mine borrow it, because I was like, I got this game, and it won't even run on my computer. Maybe it'll work on yours. So I let this friend of mine named Adam borrow it, and I just gave it to him, and that was the last I saw of Blade Runner for a long time. And actually, this is not the original box for the copy of Blade Runner that I bought. I actually still have the original box, sort of, and this is really sad. I cut it apart because I wanted to make a poster of the game. So you'll notice this box has all these best game of the year, 1998 or whatever, but this is the actual original box from 1997 that I have sadly destroyed. So cut to about a year or so later, and I had started learning how to write computer software. My dad saw that I took an interest in making video games, so he decides that he wants me to have my own computer, and he's going to loan me the money to buy a computer. And so I get a new computer, and of course, I'll use it to learn software engineering, and I did. But I'm also going to use this new computer to play all the latest video games. And so I just go all out on it, and I get this Pentium 3 processor and 128 megabytes of RAM. And I have this Voodoo 3 3500 video card. And I'm like, this will play Blade Runner. And so I had this new computer, and I ended up getting Half-Life for it. And Half-Life was really awesome. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I still really want to play Blade Runner. And it's a year later in school. And so I'm like, I don't even know if my friend Adam still has the game that I lent him a year ago. But I take a chance, and he's in chemistry class with me. And so in chemistry class, I ask him, hey, do you still have that Blade Runner game that I loaned you? And he's like, I think so. And I'm like, can I get that back? And I'm worried that he'll just keep forgetting or whatever. But like the next day or so, I get my Blade Runner game back. And of course, I am so looking forward to installing this on my new computer. And I get home and I play it. And I boot up the game, and the opening cutscene plays. And I remember even seeing like that first scene where Clovis confronts Runciter. And I remember when I had watched it at the low frame rate, that there was this scene where it looked like Clovis was grabbing a dove, but I couldn't tell if he killed it or not. And indeed, like when I saw this cutscene for the first time a year later, it's like he really did kill that dove. And I'm like, man, that is just so brutal. I remember thinking that.
And what else might we interest you in today, sir? Perhaps some virtue?
Not my animals, please. I'm begging you.
And then, of course, seeing McCoy and Goose's conversation, it's just like, man, this is just really great cutscene. And it finally made some of the stuff in the game make sense. Because I had played through the game. I'd played through the whole game, but like I didn't really fully know everything that was going on with the characters because I'd never actually seen the cutscenes.
Where's Captain Bryant?
Took a sick day. Got himself a heinous case of ptomaine poisoning. He asked me personally to run the unit in his absence. Hope you've been enjoying your leisure time, kid, because it's time to take that thumb out of your ass.
Hallelujah.
Don't get too excited. The other Blade Runners are all jammed up. Holden's sucking dinner through a straw. Gaff's working the Tyrell break-in, and Steele's working special undercover. Looks like you got this one by default.
You really know how to make a girl feel wanted.
And I just kept playing the game over and over again. I remember my 10th grade year, I was taking this U.S. history class. And one thing that I would do to help me study, I like to have Blade Runner playing in the background. I liked to let McCoy just stand on one of the scenes with like a rain sound or even the waterfall sound that's inside of the entryway to the Tyrell building. And I would just have McCoy standing there or just the various sounds of the city. And they would help me to relax as I was reading this really boring history book. And I studied so hard for this history class, and Blade Runner helped me get through it. And that's just one of my fond memories of Blade Runner. So now that I've talked about my experience with the game Blade Runner, I want to talk about the game itself and why I love this game so much. And it really all starts just from the opening cutscene. I mean, the banter that McCoy has with the other characters is absolutely hilarious. McCoy, when he arrives at the police station...
I was just finishing up my 12 out on patrol when I got the call. Welcome relief, considering that the most action I'd seen all night was a schizoid grandmother doing the shimmy in her underwear in the second sector. Last time I had a 3 was when some hooker vomited Thunderbird on Bryant's desk, and yours truly led the cleanup crew.
I mean, everything about this game is just the most clever writing that you could imagine. I mean, there's so much detail in the things that McCoy says that you just feel like he's a real character. You know, he's got real personality. He has a history. And this is actually interesting in contrast to the character from the movie, Deckard. McCoy is drastically different from the character Deckard. And I'll be talking more about the movie in another episode. But I do want to take a minute just to talk about McCoy versus Deckard. Deckard is unlikable. Deckard is bland. Deckard's dull. Deckard's boring. Deckard's not particularly interesting. You know, you don't really know anything about Deckard's past. You don't really care anything about Deckard's past. But McCoy, on the other hand, he's bright, he's bubbly, he's got a lot of personality, he's got a great sense of humor, he's very charming, he's very witty, he's incredibly intelligent. I mean, he comes off as a goofball sometimes, but he also comes off as incredibly smart. And you can just tell this from the things he says.
There were off-world rifles here and more. Grenades, explosives, modern rifles, even some police-issue restricted weaponry. Ezo wasn't some small-time fence, but a big-time arms dealer. The exact arms that renegade replicants would be looking for to survive in the big city.
There's all this background in this world. I mean, and some of this background is just to explain why Gouza's there instead of Bryant from the film, which it's interesting that Bryant wasn't there because the actor for Bryant, M. Emmett Walsh, is still alive today, which blows my mind. But, I mean, I guess they just couldn't get him to appear in this video game. The character Gouza works, though. He works throughout the video game. And of course, my favorite part in the whole opening sequence is this part where Crystal and McCoy sort of flirt with each other.
Slumming tonight, Slim?
I thought you were on special assignment.
Wasn't too damn special after I had the suckers out.
What happened?
Couple of fours were masquerading as fibroplast insulators down at Kaiser. I dressed up like a nurse. They never had a chance.
I'll bet. You put him on the machine?
Hell no. There's a beautiful little thing in here called the magic, and it ain't ever been wrong. You develop it, you got a brilliant career ahead of you.
I'm working on it.
What's Gouza got you doing tonight?
AM at Runsitter's.
Animal murder. Oh, those skin jobs got no respect for anything that truly lives and breathes. And that goddamn Eldon Tyrell ought to be zipped into a body bag and flushed into deep space.
Get rid of him, we'd be out of a job.
I think we're all overdue for a little off-world paid vacation. You can stop staring at my ass now.
You got eyes in the back of your head?
All you gotta do is ask, Slim.
And then the elevator closes. And of course, the elevator closing is somewhat reminiscent of the film when the elevator closes, although it's obviously drastically different circumstances in this particular case of the elevator closing. But you get that same sound effect. And like that banter between those two is just, it's absolutely hilarious. Like it's just great writing, in my opinion. And then, of course, we get to the opening scene. And I already described this, really, as just how beautiful it is with the neon lights, with the police lights, with the reflections on the ground. Like, everything about it's beautiful. It absolutely is. But McCoy's personality really comes out here as well. Because there's this part where McCoy just asks the officer at the scene about it.
Find anything else out here?
Zilcho. Row actions inside. Abstract art. All over the walls and ceiling.
I never did appreciate art.
And I just love that line from McCoy because you get this sense of his personality. Like, McCoy is a real funny guy. He's real hilarious, but he's not really a very, I guess, culturally attuned man. Like, he doesn't care about art. Probably making other people laugh is probably what McCoy cares about more than anything else in the world. But McCoy just has so many funny lines. And one of them, again, is on this very first scene. Like, if you click on the trash can, McCoy says,
Nothing even remotely interesting, but hell, if I was going to root through trash, my expectations weren't too high.
And this whole idea of McCoy and these hilarious lines is just strewn throughout the game. One of my favorite lines is in a scene from the movie, in one of the movie sets in Sebastian's apartment. There's this egg, and I think the egg is a reference to the film when Sebastian is making eggs for Roy and Pris. But you can click on the egg, and McCoy says,
I didn't have time to stop for synthetic eggs. I remember tasting a real one back when I was a kid. It was like liquid sunshine. Damn tasty.
But it adds a lot of context to McCoy's character. And it's just funny how he has all these things to say about everything. I mean, in that same scene, there's a chessboard. And if you click on it, McCoy is like,
I couldn't tell who was winning, and I didn't much care. Chess was a little slow for me.
Of course, the chessboard is a plot device in the film, and McCoy is just blandly saying, I don't even care about chess. You know, I mean, it's just part of McCoy's personality. He doesn't care about art. He doesn't care about chess. And all of this leads up to even the very end of the game. Well, one of the endings of the game. The Blade Runner ending of the game, where it has a similar ending to the film, where Clovis is dying and McCoy is watching him die, the same as Roy dying and Deckard watching him die.
They're all dead. You're the last one.
I wish I could just leave. Just power up this ship and fly away. But there's nowhere else to go. And no more time.
You want me to feel sorry for you.
And what about you, Ray McCoy? After what you did to my family, to my friends, do you not also seek forgiveness?
I don't need to.
I thought I could cheat my destiny. I should have cherished what little time I had instead of wasting even one precious minute on revenge.
Clovis starts spouting this poetry, and you can listen to Clovis, McCoy can listen to Clovis finish this poetry.
My hands are labored day and night, and ease comes never in my sight.
I never did like poetry.
And it's absolutely hilarious that, like, in this morbid scene where Clovis is dying, Clovis's 4 years are up and he's dying, and McCoy just shoots him and says, I never did appreciate poetry. I mean, that's just part of the humor of McCoy. And obviously you can be more sympathetic, and McCoy will just watch him die, and it's pretty sad. But even then, after Clovis is dead and various other replicants are dead, if you click on their bodies, McCoy will just say something like, what a waste. And that's it. That's what McCoy says about these. He doesn't have any thoughtful things to say about these replicants that have, they have lost their lives. So, well, speaking of the character McCoy, I want to give props to the actor for McCoy, and it's this guy named Mark Benninghoffen. And I read an interview with him about the game Blade Runner, and basically the way he describes his whole role in the game is that he just showed up, read a bunch of lines, and then that was it. And in his mind, the weirdest thing he did was that they told him he had to make a bunch of sounds as if he got shot in the shoulder. So he had to go oof, and stuff like that. But other than that, it was just a job he showed up for. He didn't really give much thought to the game, just showed up, read his lines. But this guy just did such an excellent job reading these lines. It blows my mind that he wasn't as involved with the game as one might think. And this has to be his biggest work. I've looked up this guy's IMDb, and as far as I can tell, he really just did a bunch of commercials. And on his IMDb, he was in this movie called Older Than America. And I watched this movie just because I wanted to see, real life McCoy. And I couldn't even tell which character he was. He was just some minor character. I have a theory on which character he was, but it's just not an important role or anything. But Blade Runner, in my mind, is this guy's magnum opus, because he has so many lines of dialogue in this game. It's just absolutely amazing, and he delivers them so well. I love hearing McCoy talk about stuff.
You say everything's top quality here. That go for your old buddy Spencer Gregorian, too?
I met him a while back. He bought some calfskin gloves from me. Said he wanted to do some gardening.
Calfskin?
Faux calfskin.
Gregorian said you were thrown out of cars for having violent tendencies.
Whoever Gregorian is, he's lying.
He also said you were a borderline sociopath who ought to be locked up, but I'm inclined to agree.
Don't you wish I gave a damn about what you think?
I can make you give a damn.
Let me give you a little word of advice, detective. Stay out of my business. More importantly, stay out of my face. All I'd have to do is make one vid call and you would be shoveling shit off-world for the rest of your career.
Talk to me like that some more and you'll be eating it.
And the actor just really contributed a lot to it. And it was kind of disappointing to see that the actor was yeah, I just showed up and read the lines. Because it's but you created this great character. So I guess most of the props for McCoy does need to go to the writing team at Westwood that put together this character. Maybe it was Lewis Castle and others. But yeah, he's just an excellent character. But McCoy's really only the beginning of the excellent characters in this game. I'm a big fan of Crystal as well, and Clovis. Clovis, I've heard made fun of. A lot of, or some commentators have made fun of Clovis because they're he's too over the top. No one would be spouting poetry like that. But I really like Clovis's performance as well. Clovis is played by this guy named Mark Ralston, and I've seen Mark Ralston in other things. Clovis is the baddie of this game. McCoy is the Deckard of the game, but McCoy is a totally different character. Clovis isn't really that different from the character Roy Batty. He's actually very similar. Roy quotes poetry at one point, but Roy doesn't quote nearly as much poetry as Clovis does in this game. But one of my favorite lines in the whole game is when Clovis approaches Tyrell. And it's the same, it's a tribute to the movie when Roy also approaches Tyrell.
That is a lie.
Who's there?
It's one of my children, I think, and a very resourceful one at that. Why don't you show yourself?
With pleasure.
Call security.
Who is this man?
I'd like to ask the same question.
One more word from him, and he'll be dead.
I will not be spoken.
You're certainly a man of your word.
I want all the data you have on replicant DNA structures, the mutation studies, everything.
Why don't you just take a seat? We'll have a little talk.
I don't have time for talk.
I wish I could help you, I really do. But the data is useless. The 4-year lifespan is unalterable.
My friends, my family, dying before my very eyes, and all you can say is, there is no hope.
And I love the way that Clovis just asks Tyrell how, and states, he both asks and states that there is no hope for him. His life is up. And the line is delivered so well. And this line just shows the character of Clovis, like the power behind this character. You know, and I feel strongly for Clovis. I don't like to retire Clovis. Even though I brought up earlier that McCoy has that funny line about not appreciating poetry when you shoot Clovis. I don't like to shoot Clovis. I like to let Clovis die because I think it gives Clovis the same power as a character that Roy has when Roy dies in the film. You know, as much as you empathize with Clovis, he is a psychopath. I mean, he murders the mayor just offhandedly. And I mean, there's this hilarious line there as well, just from Tyrell, which shows that Tyrell is a sociopath as well. But throughout the game, really, there's just so many good characters. I mean, McCoy just meets so many interesting people. I mean, among them all are the replicants, Clovis, of course, Guza, his supervisor, is a great character, Crystal, of course.
What are you doing here besides putting your nuts on the chopping block?
Investigating Ezo. Maybe we should compare notes.
Maybe you should find another line of work. Just in case I'm not around to bail you out next time. I'll wait for the uniforms. Why don't you grab yourself a slice of quiche or something? And pick up a bottle of scotch for the real Blade Runner, will ya? Just kidding, Slim.
And then even just miscellaneous people like Crazy Legs, Larry Hirsch, played by an employee of Westwood Studios that also played Kane, Joseph Kukin.
Oh, that's Sedan. Hey, look, a sexy blonde wants to pay top dollar for the ugliest car in the place. Who am I to say no?
Did you know who she was?
No, but I'd like to know her in the biblical sense, if you catch what I'm saying.
Like, all of it's just really great. And there's these cameo appearances in the game as well. Even Brian James appears in his role as Leon. And I always like to think that McCoy's encounter with Leon happens right before Leon gets retired by Rachel. And then Rachel makes an appearance as well. Rachel's appearance is just a minimal appearance. But, you know, it's nice to see her anyway. I mean, Rachel gets the full 3D cinematic model treatment. The character Gaff appears in the game, but the character Gaff is not played by the same actor. He's not played by Edward James Olmos. He's just played by some voice actor. But the character Gaff is much more developed in this game than he is in the movie as well. It almost feels like it's not really the same character, because I would say the character Gaff in the film is, you don't really know much about him. You just sort of know he's there. He's there to look after Deckard, to make sure Deckard doesn't screw up. And depending on whether or not you think Deckard's a replicant, he might have other motives as well. But in the game, Gaff is just sort of a mentor to McCoy. Gaff talks a lot more in the game. Gaff doesn't speak that city-speak language that you can't even understand. He contributes a lot to it, and I always liked the character Gaff in this game quite a bit, although maybe they should have just given him a different name and made him a different character. And Gaff never really gets the full 3D treatment. He's sort of in one of the endings at the very end, but you only see him from behind and you never actually see his face, which I suppose is so that they never had to create an Edward James Olmos model, because the in-game version is so low resolution you can't even really tell what the faces look like anyway.
You know, you got some interesting neighbors, McCoy.
Yeah, well, I've been too busy to visit lately.
You gonna turn yourself in?
I'm thinking about it.
Think hard. You killed anyone yet? It's like I said before. You retire a human, your career is over. Your life too, maybe. But we don't live forever, do we?
I mean, that pretty much really sums up what I love so much about the game. Is like, it's all about the characters. And the game, it's just McCoy moves from one character to... I mean, I forgot to mention Gordo. Like, I think Gordo is hilarious. Gordo, what I feel like about the character Gordo is that the writers wrote this really hilarious character, but they were like, they felt unconfident in their own writing. And so the joke about Gordo is that he's funny because he's not funny. But me, I even think Gordo is funny. Like, Gordo... I guess Gordo does have the funny because he's not funny vibe, but he's also just a hilarious person. Like, if you met Gordo in real life, you know, you would just think he's a pretty funny guy. Gordo's the type of guy where he's like really funny, but you'd never be friends with him. He's not the type of funny friend. You know, he's the weirdo. Like in high school, he's the weirdo that no one was really friends with, but everyone thought was really funny. I mean, that's what type of character Gordo is. And Gordo has this stand-up comedy routine.
What does a marriage and a tornado have in common? First, there's a lot of sucking and blowing, and then you lose your house. You know what my first wife's nickname was? Twister. A doctor calls up his patient. I got bad news and I got worse news. The bad news is you only got 24 hours to live. The patient says, "What could be worse than that?" The doctor says, "I've been trying to reach you since yesterday." Guess what happens to a replicant who does his job really well? Early retirement, baby!
And like, I've used jokes from Gordo's stand-up comedy in real life and people laughed at them. Like, I've used the tornado joke that Gordo delivers. I mean, Gordo's really only weak joke is the doctor having only 2 weeks to live joke. Doctor telling you only have 2 weeks to live joke. I don't think that one's particularly funny. So that one's true to the Gordo character, but the tornado joke is great. And all of the Blade Runner jokes are really funny as long as, you know, you're familiar with Blade Runner, which if you're playing the game, you are familiar with Blade Runner. Like, you couldn't go to a stand-up comedy club and start dropping the Blade Runner jokes because no one would get what you're talking about. It's just a really clever pun that only someone familiar with the universe of Blade Runner would get. And like, that's why I like the Gordo character. And of course, if you get the opportunity to retire Gordo, McCoy drops this line about how he felt bad for retiring Gordo because he was just an entertainment model after all. And it's like, yeah, I mean, Gordo is the type of replicant that really did nothing wrong. Speaking of the character Lucy, Lucy is sort of the ever-present character. Lucy shows up a lot. Lucy's very prominent in the opening cutscene. Lucy's prominent throughout the game. McCoy is usually trailing Lucy. I mean, all the evidence is surrounding this girl, Lucy. And so she's really the most, right after Clovis, and maybe even tied with Clovis, she's the most important character in the game, or important replicant in the game. I mean, she's possibly a human as well, but she's still an important, prominent character in the game. She shows up throughout the game. But weirdly enough, if Lucy does get retired, it's just sort of a sad ending because it's like McCoy retires a little girl, or Crystal retires her. I mean, however it plays out, and it's just kind of a sad ending. It's anticlimactic when Lucy gets retired. Like, I really feel that the strongest versions of the game, the strongest story you can get out of it, is if Lucy does survive up until the end. Like, if Lucy gets retired by Crystal at the very end of the game, I think that's an okay, you know, that's still a fairly strong story. It's a sad story, but it's still much stronger than if Lucy gets retired in the Hall of Mirrors by McCoy or Crystal. But one of the weird things about the game, one of the things that always bothered me about the game was the Lucy car ending. Because in that ending, Lucy is like the love interest. It's like when Deckard runs off with Rachel, but it's McCoy running off with Lucy. And Lucy is this 14-year-old girl. And so that ending always really bothered me because it's clear from the game that Lucy has sort of a crush and a love interest in McCoy.
We could buy a car from that place next to the arcade.
A ground car wouldn't get us too far.
One of those flying cars would, though. It could take us all the way out to that beautiful lake. You know, the one with the trees and the flowers.
Lucy, there's a good chance...
I'll meet you there, okay? At the place where he sells the cars.
Wait, Lucy...
Oh, I love you so much, Ray.
But one thing that was pointed out to me, and one thing that I read in one of the strategy guides for the game, was that this ending isn't necessarily a McCoy running off with Lucy as a love interest ending. But it's an ending where Lucy runs off with, or McCoy runs off with Lucy as sort of a protector, as a father figure. And when this finally was explained to me, and this was just this year, I was like, okay, the Lucy ending is not nearly as creepy as I originally thought it was. Because the more I thought about it, the more I was like, okay, well, Lucy had Clovis as a father figure. Clovis is going to die. You know, Clovis dies really, I mean, almost no matter what. Obviously, there's an ending where Clovis might survive, but Clovis's 4 years are up, and so he's either going to get retired or he's just going to expire. But Lucy needs someone to look after her, and he had Clovis. Now, if Lucy runs away with McCoy, then Clovis is going to die. And so Lucy does need a caretaker. And the more I realized that, the less this ending where Lucy and McCoy run off together bothered me, because it's like, well, McCoy could either run off with her and then just sort of like reject her sexual advances, but sort of like foster her as a daughter. Well, it might work out, because that way at least McCoy's not leaving Lucy on the street to die or become a prostitute or worse. Yeah, I have a greater appreciation for this ending. Of course, I mean, you can still interpret it that McCoy is just a dirty old man and runs away with a 14-year-old girl.
I didn't know where we were going, and I didn't much care. Away from the city first, and then as far as this heap could take us.
And I'm glad that this was clarified to me, because McCoy just has such a bubbly personality. I hate to think that he's a pedophile. So this has been my thoughts on the game Blade Runner. It's definitely one of my favorite adventure games. It's an amazing game. I highly recommend it. I mean, it is a game that you can just play over and over again, and like you'll see something new every time. I mean, as long as you're willing to explore different parts of the game. And as always, feel free to comment below. Let me know what you think of the game. Let me know what your experiences with the game are, even if it's just your experience buying the game or your experience watching a friend play the game or something like that. Or let me know if you think I'm wrong about anything about the game, or even if you think it's just a horrible game, let me know why you think it's a horrible game. And so this has been the Jack Attack. I am Jack Everett. Thanks for watching.
Chief Bryant wants to talk to you. He says you're really ready now.
It never ends, does it?
You're a real Blade Runner now. Full retirement bonuses and everything. You've done a man's job, sir.
How come I don't feel good about it?
Who knows? Buy yourself another animal, maybe. A real one, not a Tyrell fake.
She wasn't fake.
Whatever you want to believe, McCoy.